Flying today is slower than it was 50 years ago, and that's not a joke. We have actually gone backwards in terms of speed. Even just 20 years ago, you could fly across the ocean at twice the speed of sound on Concorde. But sadly, this marvel of engineering has vanished from our skies. Today, we're standing at the threshold of supersonic travel's potential comeback. But the question remains, can we finally get it right this time? Now, before we dive into supersonic planes, let's first talk about what going supersonic actually means. An object is said to be going supersonic when it's traveling faster than the speed of sound, also known as Mach 1. At sea level, that's about 767 miles per hour or 1,235 kilometers per hour, but it can vary depending on air temperature and altitude. When something reaches this speed, it starts creating shock waves in the air because the air can't move out of the way fast enough. These shock waves are what we call the sound barrier. As a plane approaches this invisible barrier, the air pressure around it changes rapidly. It experiences a spike in drag, and the airflow around the plane becomes turbulent and unpredictable. It can even cause the plane's control surfaces to behave differently, making it harder to steer or stabilize. And once a plane punches through the sound barrier, all those shock waves merge into a single powerful wave, creating what we hear on the ground as a sonic boom. This boom is loud enough to break windows or rattle buildings, which is one of the main reasons that supersonic planes aren't allowed to fly over land in most countries. So because of all of this, supersonic planes have different design choices than most of the planes we are all familiar with. They utilize delta wings, which are much more triangular and reduce drag at high speeds, and they have much slimmer aerodynamic fuselages. The first plane to ever go supersonic was the Bell X-1 in 1947. It was built by Bell Aircraft, and the whole point of it was simply to prove that we could go that fast. They launched it off of a B-29, and moments later, it produced the world's first ever man-made sonic boom. Fast forward to the 1960s, and an idea was born to create a passenger jet that could fly supersonic. Concorde was born out of a partnership between Britain and France, and it was honestly a gamble from the start. Development would stretch longer than a decade, but it finally made its first flight in 1969, and its first scheduled passenger flight was in 1976. It was able to connect London and New York in just over 3 hours, which is a route that takes almost 7 hours today. Concorde's unique design with its drooping nose and bright afterburners meant it was a sight to see at any airport and frequently attracted plane spotters to watch it land and take off. However, Concorde was actually not the world's first supersonic airliner. The Soviet answer to this was the Tupolev Tu-144, and it made its maiden flight in 1968. It actually topped out slightly faster than Concorde, but the speed came at a price. Its engines were less efficient, louder, and more prone to overheating. A turning point came in 1973 when a Tupolev Tu-144 crashed at the Paris Air Show, and the reason for that crash still remains debated to this day. Public trust in this plane was shattered before it ever made commercial flights. It started flying commercially in 1977, but it only flew 55 passenger flights before being retired. Concorde, by comparison, was much more successful. Flying on Concorde was a total event, starting from the moment you got to the airport. You were escorted to private lounges and given free champagne to drink, and then you'd board a luxurious plane with just 100 seats and quickly make your way up to 60,000 feet, where you could actually see the curvature of the Earth. Thanks to the time zone change, on westbound flights, you would actually arrive in New York earlier than you left London. Now, this type of luxury came at a price. A round-trip ticket on Concorde cost the equivalent of about $20,000 or more in today's dollars. And it really wasn't cheap for the airlines operating it either. Each Concorde burned twice the fuel per passenger when compared to a 747, and maintenance was complex and expensive. Despite those high ticket prices, airlines never turned a profit operating Concorde. In the end, government subsidies were what kept it alive, but it wouldn't live forever. Okay, so let's start with the biggest challenge: fuel. In the early 1970s, just as Concorde was gearing up for commercial service, the world was hit by the oil crisis of 1973. Global fuel prices almost quadrupled overnight, and as I mentioned, the Concorde was not exactly fuel efficient. So that's part of the reason that tickets on Concorde were so expensive right from the start. So this plane was not for the average person. It was for CEOs, celebrities, and the ultra-rich. And unfortunately, in this case, limited capacity and exclusivity mixed with super high operating costs did not lead to a good outcome. But it wasn't just the money. Another big problem for Concorde was the sound barrier. Now, since they were creating that loud sonic boom I talked about, it became very clear early on that they weren't going to be able to fly these planes over land. Governments worldwide ended up banning supersonic flight over populated areas, and this meant that Concorde could really only fly supersonic over the ocean. Routes like New York to London did great, but this kind of killed their dreams of a global network. Then in July of 2000, Air France Flight 4590 crashed soon after takeoff, killing everyone on board and 4 people on the ground. This crash was a turning point for Concorde because, like the Paris Air Show crash, this shook public perception of Concorde. And then just over a year later, 9/11 happened, which led to a huge decrease in passenger numbers, and airlines across the world were cutting costs. In 2003, after just 27 years of service, Concorde flew its final commercial flight. In the end, no one thing killed Concorde, but rather a combination of economics, noise regulations, and tragic timing. And once it was gone, we were left without civilian supersonic flights anywhere in the world. Now, despite this, the military has been pushing for even faster speeds. Experimental planes like NASA's X-43A scramjet hit what's known as hypersonic speeds, reaching Mach 7 and Mach 9. But that plane didn't even have a pilot in the cockpit, let alone passengers. Meanwhile, commercial aviation has taken a different path. In the decades after Concorde's retirement, the airline industry has doubled down on fuel efficiency instead of speed. Planes like the 787 Dreamliner and Airbus A350 were built to use less fuel while flying further and carrying more people. But in recent years, there is a new company that is hoping to be the one to bring back supersonic flight. That company is called Boom Supersonic, and their mission is to build a faster, more sustainable, and more affordable supersonic jet. Their planned jet is called Overture. It will seat 65 to 88 passengers, cruising at Mach 1.7 at an altitude of 60,000 feet. They're hoping to connect London and New York in just 3.5 hours. Now, they're also hoping for something that Concorde would have never been able to do, which is net zero carbon emissions. They're hoping to use 100% sustainable aviation fuel, as well as better aerodynamics and more efficient engines than Concorde. Their prototype is called XB1, nicknamed Baby Boom, and it is a 1/3 scale demonstrator designed to basically prove the technology that Boom has been producing. In January of 2025, Baby Boom took its first supersonic flight, breaking the sound barrier 3 times. Now that they've begun to prove the technology, the next step will be creating production models of Overture. They've already landed some big airlines, including United, American, and Japan Airlines. They have each signed purchase agreements for up to 35 planes, and they're targeting transatlantic and trans-Pacific flights like New York to London, Tokyo to Seattle, and Los Angeles to Sydney. So what will it be like to fly on Overture? Boom has released some renderings of what they hope the planes will look like on the inside, and Overture will be 85% quieter than Concorde and 20% more fuel efficient per seat, and will meet modern noise and emission standards. And they have a pretty aggressive timeline. They're hoping to roll out first production of Overture by 2026, with commercial flights beginning in 2029. It all sounds amazing, but here's the million-dollar question. Can Boom succeed where Concorde failed? Let's first talk about the math. Boom claims that Overture will be 20% more fuel efficient per seat than Concorde, thanks to better materials, engines, and design. As we learned, Concorde's fuel consumption was one of its biggest downfalls. It burned about 22 liters of fuel per passenger per 100 kilometers, but by comparison, a modern 787 burns closer to 3 liters per passenger. Boom hasn't published exact figures, but aviation analysts estimate that Overture will need a load factor of about 70% to break even, meaning most seats on most flights would need to be sold. That brings us to the market. Is there really enough demand for a premium, super fast, low passenger jet? Concorde relied on the ultra-rich, but also business travelers who were willing to pay a premium to get somewhere quickly. With the rise of remote work and virtual meetings, business travel still hasn't rebounded to pre-2020 levels. And even today, airlines are rethinking what premium actually means, and it might mean lie-flat seats and Wi-Fi, not speed. Now let's talk pricing, because this is going to be one of the most important things in my opinion. Boom is targeting a price range similar to today's business class, at least initially. This is not necessarily affordable for the average person. They've quoted around $2,500 to $5,000 one way. They hope to bring down prices in the future, but industry analysts remain skeptical that Boom will actually be able to charge any low fares at all, and that they will need to command a significant fare premium while maintaining high load factors. But pricing aside, there are still regulatory and technical issues that have to be dealt with. One of Concorde's biggest problems was the sonic boom, and here in 2025, those regulations have not changed. Supersonic flight over land is still banned in the US, Europe, and most of the world. During Baby Boom's series of test flights in January, they were able to successfully create sonic booms that were not audible from the ground. They are hoping to change regulations and allow these planes to fly anywhere, which would really open up possibilities. Boom also has the issue of creating brand new engines from scratch. They were originally working with Rolls-Royce to create supersonic engines, but after they pulled out, they started working with Florida Turbine Technologies, GE Additive, and Standard Aero to create a new engine design. But yet another issue is the environmental question. They have promised net zero carbon emissions using 100% sustainable aviation fuel, but SAF is very limited in global supply and is far more expensive than regular jet fuel. And really, no matter what fuel it uses, it still won't be able to be as efficient as the planes airlines have become accustomed to using. So will it work? Maybe? I think Boom's design is good. It's better than anything that we've seen thus far, but there are still a lot of ifs. If the laws change, if the prices are right, if the economics work, and the plane doesn't even really actually exist yet, or at least not in any kind of public way. I'm very curious to see if we actually see the Overture in 2026. If the plane actually comes out and they're able to get supersonic flights approved over land, we really could see the return of commercial supersonic flights before the decade ends. But if the flights end up being astronomically expensive or too limited, we could be looking at another Concorde. Supersonic travel is one of those things we almost got right. We were close, but we had to let it go. But maybe this time, with smarter designs and lessons learned, we do get it right. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!